Hello, everybody else. I can see 9 people at a time. So I'm just going to, you'll see me doing this every now and again because I'm using an iPad and it looks as though it's going to be really sort of technically exciting and I'm going to poke somebody in the face, but it's not. It's just me and the iPad. Right, I'm just having a look across. Oh, yes, I can see. Oh, lots of people. A couple of people I know from previous years. A couple of people I recognise from more recently. Lots of people I don't know. Hello. Oh, I can see waving. Oh my God, this is fantastic. I've never had people waving at me on Zoom. You're so lovely. Thank you so much. We're going to do a number of things over the next hour. And most of the time, I'm not going to be talking. Some of you will be already glad about that. Okay, so we're going to do several things. I'm going to start with a little bit of chat. This is what I'm doing at the moment. Then there's going to be a bit of an overview of what we're going to do. We're going to have some warm-up writing. There's going to be an opportunity to use the chat function. Now, this is me relying on the fact that we've been in lockdown for a year. Some of you have probably already used Google Meets, Hangouts, Microsoft Wave chatty things, and Zoom. So if you are on a desktop, there's probably a thing at the bottom for chatting. And if you're on an iPad, it's in the top right-hand corner for chatting. Oh, fantastic. I can see people talking already. There's somebody's got a sleeping cat. That's awesome. That's my favorite thing. So I'm also going to quite a lot of the time ask people to be on mute, simply because I noticed yesterday in a session, there was lots of feedback. Can any of you hear my ticking clock? Okay, I got, this is excellent. This is my granny's ticking clock, and I realised that I couldn't see what time it was because I haven't got any other clocks in the room except on the iPad, which is off at the moment. Okay, so I've got a ticking clock. I hope it won't disturb anyone. So we're going to have 3 writer bits. There's going to be a warm-up in a few minutes. We're going to have a slightly longer slot, then a longer slot, and if we've got time, we'll do a third one. And my hope for today is that you'll come away at the end possibly with the beginnings of a piece, possibly with some ideas for how you might do some journaling, possibly with some lovely sentences or some nice words, or it's going to be no pressure though. If you come away with an empty post-it note, that's fine as well. If you just think or just have an hour where you think about what you're writing, also very good. Okay, and if you need to leave at any point, this is not like a class where you put your hand up and say, oh, well, I need to leave. Sorry, it's fine, you can just go, don't worry. Okay, I'm just going to flick across the page of the iPad. Everybody doing okay so far? You can nod if you are, shake if you're not. It helps if I can sort of see that. Yeah, I've got some thumbs up there. I loved that. That's awesome. Very good. Okay, so we're going to start with a really quick warm-up. You're going to need either a pen and paper, or pencil and paper, or fingers and keyboard, or if you use assistive technology, that's what you're going to use. Some people really love to turn the camera off when they're actually writing. If that's what you want to do, it's completely fine. Don't feel like you have to keep the camera on. I'm going to ask you to write for 2 minutes, only 2 minutes. Oh my God, 2 minutes. So I'm going to give you a 10-second warning when we're getting close to the end. And I'm going to ask you to write something really straightforward. I tell you that now. Okay. So just before we get on to that, this is giving you thinking time. I'm going to say a tiny bit about the Urban Tree Festival and why I'm doing this session. Last year, I wrote a piece of flash which came out in the anthology. There's at least one other anthology author here today. I wrote a piece of flash. It was my first ever story, and it was one of the winners. And that was just like hugely, hugely encouraging. If you're somebody who's not yet submitted somewhere, really encourage you to do it. It was fantastic. This year, I've got 2 pieces in, a story and a poem. I'm not a poet, but don't tell them that, okay? So what I'm going to encourage you to do is over the next 2 minutes, I want you to just think about the oldest tree that you know. The oldest tree that you know. I'm going to ask you to write about it for 2 minutes. I'm not going to ask you to share it, except you might share a few things in the chat. Oldest tree you know, 2 minutes, ready, steady, go. Lovely. Thank you very much. And I could see a few people staring off, inspired by a tree. Perhaps they could see it in the distance, either in their imagination or in reality. Or you may have just been thinking about a tree that you knew. What I'd like you to do, if you're willing to, up in the chat, if you just put down any words to do with the tree, it might be where it was, it might be some other thing to do with it, it might be what kind of tree it was, or just some qualities of it that you remembered. If you can't think of anything, it's fine, you don't have to put anything up in the chat. But if we have anything up in the chat, I'll just make sure that we hear about it. Great, so I've got the words reaching down, struck by lightning, walnut and squirrels and a swing, a kauri tree in the North Island, bony fingers, scraggly, oh, a horse chestnut tree, a lace oak and a mighty spruce, fantastic, some wonderful trees, an oak, a child of beam from an old pub I went, yep. The tree started as a branch and grew into magnificence. It was a squawking babe, lovely, some wonderful tree things there. One of the things that we're doing today is considering trees that we know of from either our own past or the historical past in general. I'm going to read a very short piece to you from Seamus Heaney. Now, is that the right way round for you and just not for me? It's the right way round. Okay, Seamus Heaney, field work. Here is a man who liked his trees. My goodness me. We've got 3 sessions this week. Now, some of you might be able to come to all 3, in which case what you'll find is today we're looking at past trees or past landscapes. Wednesday, we'll be looking at ones in the present, and Friday, we'll be looking at ones in the future. So past, present, future. So this is Seamus Heaney, and he wrote Fieldwork, or it was published in the late 1960s, I think. Yeah. Okay, so it's just part of a longer piece. Song. A rowan like a lipsticked girl. Between the by road and the main road, alder trees at a wet and dripping distance. Stand off among the rushes. There are the mud flowers of dialect and the immortelles of perfect pitch. And that moment when the bird sings very close to the music of what happens. I'm not going to read it again, just some words, some beautiful words that, I mean, he's not known for being bad, is he really? I'm not expecting Seamus Heaney from everybody by the end of the afternoon, although if you get there, awesome. What I'm going to ask now is for you to consider out in your own landscape, whether it's your immediate landscape or it's your historical landscape, or it's your biographical landscapes, it could be any of those. I would like you to imagine that you're actually in a drone or a helicopter or a plane or somewhere, or what are those things? Hot air balloons, a hot air balloon. It was one of my dad's ambitions to go in a hot air balloon, which he did when he was 70. And he said the thing that bugged him about it, he was so busy worrying about his hair being burnt off the top because it was very burny that he barely looked down. And I said, so that was nothing to do with you being afraid of heights. So if you're afraid of heights, try and forget about that. Imagine you're a bird and you're completely safe. So I'd like you to look down at the landscape, and it might be an urban landscape. It might be a more rural one. It might be in Britain, or it might be much further afield. It might be where you grew up. It might be just somewhere you visited. And what I'd like you to do for about 7 to 10 minutes, imagining you're above it, but you might focus down, you might telescope down a bit. I'd like you to write about what you see in that landscape. Might be a particular tree in that landscape, might be something that involves other things, not people though, unless it's a very urban landscape and you might have got people populating that landscape, the landscape primarily that we're interested in. Okay, about 7 to 10 minutes. I'll give you a couple of minutes warning when we're getting close, just checking for nods to see if people know what I'm asking them to do. Yeah, nods and thumbs are awesome. Going to check the second page just in case. Yeah. Okay, awesome job. Okay, so 7 to 10 minutes. Ready, steady, go. Lovely, thank you. Wonderful. Now, I'm going to invite anyone who fancies it, just dropping into the chat up in the corner, where it was and any brief qualities about it. So I've put something about where I was writing about, which is a water meadow, both one that I remember very well from my childhood, which was hemmed in by willow, and I feel like there was hazel, but that may just be wishful thinking. It may be a memory of a memory rather than what was really there. But there was certainly willow, and there were mallards, lots of ducks and Canada geese. And I remember a very small child, I hadn't really seen Canada geese, and they seemed very tall compared to me, sort of just a little bit shorter than I was. So any places that you can think of and any of the qualities of them, just up in the chat. Are you being shy? Oh no, there we go. Cygnets, paddling on the crest bed, shielded, a wily weeping willow, comfort covering them from bad rap herons. Bad rap herons, oh my goodness, herons. I have heron memories from childhood. We had a heronry near us when I was small. Poplar trees that told the Welsh drovers that it was a safe place to rest. Safe to rest there. Shadows and structure cast by low light. Chamois, marmot, ravines. I may well have pronounced chamois badly. What I'm going to ask you to do now, a row of tall trees at the end of the garden, where I grew up, tall and thin like cellar spiders. Lovely. Now, some of you are already starting to think about the exercise I'm going to ask you to do next. And that is, in the landscape or urbanscape or weatherscape that you've just written about, almost certainly there will have been some parts of that act in that landscape in some way. So I've got a list from mine, which includes a field margin, ducks, the river, a dog, there was a walker, cowslip, hazel, hawthorn, elder, woodpecker, blackbird, and so on, winter wheat. What I would like you to do, so these are all sort of like the nouns, they're objects in the landscape, but we're going to make them the subject now. What I'd like you to do is identify over the next few minutes a list of things in that landscape, who can act on that landscape, who behave in that landscape, who can affect that landscape. Okay, just for a few minutes on that. So a couple of nods, so a couple of thumbs, so a couple of people frowning. I like frowns. Frowns are really awesome. It means that, you know, a bit of effort here. Okay, so a couple of minutes on that. Things that are acting in the landscape. Lovely. Wherever you've got to, fantastic. I could see a few people going, yep, I think I've run out now, or thinking, there's so many, there are a lot. We're going to go straight into the next exercise without any feedback. After this next exercise, I'm going to invite anyone who fancies it, reading out what they come up with for the combinations that we're about to do. You don't have to, but I'll invite you to. So just have that in the back of your mind. If you think, oh, I might like to read that, that sounds really awesome. It's going to be very simple though. You've got your list of nouns. Now I want you to think about, what do those things do in the landscape? So I wrote down the cowslip forgives. So it's not necessarily what it actually does, because what's a cowslip doing? Eating and reproducing. That's basically it. But I'd like to think the cowslip forgave me for treading on it when I was a small child, or picking it. Don't tell anybody. Oh my God, cowslips, I'm so sorry. The woodpecker cautions. The field margin drives. So things like that. It doesn't have to be the straightforward, the dog barks, but I'm happy if your dog barks. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 4.5 minutes for that. Okay. All right, I'm going to invite you to just tell me any combinations that you had. I put in the chat a few from a class I was in a couple of weeks ago, which I particularly liked, about the moss being upholstery and the ruined house betraying the old prosperity. I loved that as a line. Just unmute yourself and tell us it. No need to stand on ceremony too much. Don't have to put your hand up first. And if you speak over each other, not to worry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Omni from Tallahassee, Florida, and I identified 11, but I will share 3 that came from me and 1 that came from my grandmother in 1973. So the ones that came from me: the sky welcomes, come to me. The me in she is also the she in me. And that's in reference to looking at the tree and seeing the elders. And then the dogs don't understand why I can't pee on the tree. The one from my grandmother, she wrote in 1973, the sun is true witness.
Beautiful. Thank you. Perfect examples there. Lovely. Thank you, Chris. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to share a couple?
I've got one. The pondweed squelch shoots.
Lovely.
The yellow flags sunny side slide. And I've also got the swallows stroke swifts, because I can never tell them apart. Twin scoop.
Very nice. Lovely. Thank you, Cheryl. Smashing. Anyone else?
I've got a couple. I've got a skylark is deceitful. I've got bluebells play percussion. And I've got dark barns rise up desolate.
Lovely. Thank you, Claire. Smashing. Anyone else? You won't be going first now, and you won't be going last either. I'm flicking through the pages, seeing if there's anyone else. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is, using any of the combinations that you've just written that you particularly liked, maybe there's 1 or 2 that you thought, oh, I just wrote some combos that I was not expecting to, I quite like that. I think I'm going to now write about the cowslip forgiving something and a hazel shivering. So I'm going to ask you to use some of your combinations and write for about, let's think, about 8 to 9 minutes. And at the end, I'm going to invite anyone who fancies it reading out. We won't do very much, we won't do anything in the way of feedback, but just to honour the words that you write over the next 8 minutes or so. So you might want to do that at the end of 8 minutes. This can be fiction or non-fiction or poetry or prose poetry or words that you just scatter on the page. All of it's welcome. Okay, 8 minutes or so. Super duper. This reminds me, a long time ago, I taught in universities and I used to have to invigilate exams, and you'd say, oh, you've got 30 seconds, everyone put your pen down. And it was terrible. I can see a few of you making that kind of, oh, I remember that from school or from college or wherever. Oof. Anyway, oh, I made my hands go all tingly. That's horrible. So let's put that to one side. I'm going to invite anyone who fancies it just reading what they wrote, or some of what they wrote. You don't have to read the whole thing. Anyone fancy that? Just going to flick through the page. I can see at least one person has unmuted themselves, which is always a good indication that they're willing. So I'm going to come back to them. Claire, go for it.
Okay. Slowly the orchestra begins. A willow warbler, treble notes from the chaffinch, blackcap quavers, a spaniel shivers, a shy nightingale in disguise, her woody plumage hides the symphony that lies within her fragile chest. As she sings, the bluebells and wood sorrel join in. Muddy fields and dense copses of evergreen sway in rippling rhythm as the sound's waves wash over the meadow.
Lovely. Really lovely. Thank you. Beautiful. I can see a few people doing the little clap thing. You've got a little clap thing up on the chat thing.
Thank you. I can't see, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I saw that Chris did as well. Got a hand up. Go for it, Chris.
Thank you. The title is The Me and She is Also the She and Me. If I stop to think about my grandmas, one of them is 94 years old and the other one would have been over 100. I am grateful for these two women because they were vessels that brought forth my parents, and because of that union brought forth me. To have both an elder and an ancestor who has seen nearly a century of love, pain, abuse, joy, trauma, and celebrations, how could I ever be disrespectful? How dare I ever just walk by them without acknowledging their presence? That would be rude, right? Well, most trees are our elders, and I believe my ancestor spirits are in most trees. Out of respect, I cannot walk by a tree and not outwardly or inwardly acknowledge her existence. That would be rude, right? Once again, the me and she is also the she and me. I love you, elders. I love you, ancestors. Ashe.
Lovely. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm glad we've learned about the whole clapping thing. Thank you, Chris. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Can I invite you to share?
Okay.
Go for it.
We hear tell the swallow swifts, we can't tell the difference. Twins scoop the pondweed, squelch shooting to its heart. We hear tell cats evil catch victory bowls in the durlies, afore the neighbor's chickens glad gad, and Tito the dog pilots his shaken dreams to the edges. We hear tell the bad, the otter snap crunching, the boy's welly sink subbing forever, and the good, the egrets caring, breezes bathing, yellow flag sunny side sliding up. We hear tell the boy tossed by rain raids, the wind haranguing his tongue, red kites jump jetting his soul beneath the watchman willow, frond shading the babes.
Lovely. Fantastic. It is such a gift to hear people's writing. My goodness, such a gift. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cheryl. That was wonderful. The red kites do it for me every time. I can remember their introduction where I grew up. And when I went to see my dad, who's 93, so Chris, that really spoke to me because my dad's that sort of age now. Every time I go down the motorway, as I get closer to his house, there are red kites launching into the air, and it feels like there is possibility we can come back from the edge of extinctions, because they were extinct in England and they were reintroduced. And I love that possibility, the hope in an explosion of red feathers and beak and claw. Wonderful, just wonderful. Can I invite we've probably got time for one more person. Can I invite anyone else to read if they would like to?
Okay. Oh.
Lovely.
This is called Crystal Palace Park, which is in southeast London. The willow waits across the lake from the Victorian dinosaurs as pigeons gather surreptitiously like crows in the birds on that climbing frame. Blink and they double, quadruple, savvy to the human's entrance and propensity to scatter seed.
Fantastic. I know those dinosaurs really well. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I hope they're all right at the moment. Are they okay?
Yeah, they're being repaired slowly, bit by bit, and getting a facelift. So yeah. Very
good. I went there when I was quite small, and it made me want to be a paleontologist, partly because it was one of the longest words I could say at the time. Really. I'm an archaeologist because it was shorter and it was easier to say. But
yeah, there's a beautiful new bridge over to the dinosaur island now that pivots and goes into place if you need it. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on.
Oh, that's clever. That's a good idea, because I know they were vandalised last year. Oh, wonderful. I do love them. Thank you. Oh, it's so interesting when people read or speak about their own experience. But one of the wonderful things about writing about nature is that almost always it touches on something for other people. There's always a kernel that blossoms in us in some way. It's almost full. You've been amazing. You've written for pretty well all of an hour. I hope you will have the opportunity to use what you've written or use some of the processes that we've used in some way. If you're coming on Wednesday, there are still a couple of places left, and you'll be able to go and book up for them. At the end of the week, I'll send around a handout. I talked to Tess from the Urban Tree Festival. She said that she can send around a handout. It will have 3 things on it. One is it will have a list of the readings that we'll have throughout the week. The second is that there will be a list of the kind of venues that you will take nature writing. So it'll be a mixture of literary and more practically sort of like BBC Wildlife magazine, places that would take nature writing in that enjoyer or creative non-fiction or poetry. And there will also be, I've forgotten what, oh yeah, I thought I would write down a brief reminder about the activities that we've done. Thank you very much to Andrew, who's made sure that I didn't go over time and has sent me little notes every now and again. If you want to save the chat, you need to do something that he says in the chat right now. I've mentioned about booking for Wednesday or Friday. If you want to buy copies of Canopy, either last year's or this year's, you can buy it from the Urban Tree Festival website. On Sunday, there's going to be a writer's showcase where all the people shortlisted this year will be reading from their piece of work. It's going to be facilitated by someone completely fantastic. There are also lots of other events going on in the Urban Tree Festival throughout the week, and I'm so proud of myself for remembering to say so. Lots of things that you can book onto both indoors from the comfort of your own home. And at the beginning, Andrew said it was really exciting that I was actually Zooming this year, not from somewhere where the roof was coming in, because last year our roof was falling down. This year it's not. It's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to do the whole waving thing as we come to a close. And I don't know how to turn it off. 2 days ago on Monday, we were looking at, in the first session, which are very loosely connected with trees in the past, trees in the present today, and trees in the future on Friday. So Monday was about the past. And what I'm going to do is to ask you to think about, Monday was the past, today, trees in your present. It may be that where you're sitting, or from your flat or house, that you can see trees. I did this exercise last year, and I was in an attic room and I could see half of 6 trees. And people kept saying, enjoy nature. And I thought, yeah, half of 6 trees. It was the top half, but they were decapitated, so it's a little bit. But I would like you to think of a tree that you currently either can see or that you're familiar with enough to know it. 2 minutes, please, to write down all of the colours you associate with that tree. And if you're somebody who is colour blind in some way, please will you describe it in whatever way works for you. Okay? Ready, steady, go. All right, okay. Wherever you've got to, if you can, in the chat, add some of the colours that you came up with, that would be awesome. Ooh, rusty, I love that. Silvery white, golden. Elephant grey, fantastic. Russet, olive, hoary smoky grey, chewing gum grey. Chewing gum grey, that's incredibly evocative, goodness me. Lime, olive, brown, yellow, shadowy grey. The trunk, the colour of my dad's weathered face, lovely. Gunmetal smoke, fantastic, fantastic. It reminds me of when I was a kid and thinking that trees were green and brown. And that was it. And now I realize, of course, if I look a bit more carefully, they're everything but just green and brown. So I'm just going to read a very short piece out of this book. This is A Picture of Wind, and it's published by Longbarrow Press by J.R. Carpenter, who I think is a Canadian poet. And this is from the month of May. It's really short. Lilac is easy, or mock orange, too often forgotten, modest irises, unperceived, amongst grass-like leaves. Apple blossoms at a fugitive stage, a roseate haze, trees grey with age, a pewter sky, gleams light around the edges, anticipating summer. The cherry at its most magnificent. So in just 7 lines, the poet has 9 different plants or trees and numerous colours just to evoke a very short seasonal period, the beginning of May, when all of these things are in blossom and you start to sneeze if you're allergic to lilac, as I am, and these wonderful different colours are also suggested. So considering that same tree, if you want, you can add in a different tree as well. It might be a copse or a spinney or a smudge on the hillscape. I would like you to, now some of you be familiar with this practice called permaculture, which is a design practice in the human and social landscape, as well as the agricultural and horticultural landscape. A couple of people I see made a little nod there. A couple of people are looking like, okay, it's interesting. Permaculture is a design process, and it's underpinned by different principles and different ethics. And one of the principles is that a single element in any setting should serve multiple functions. And when I did my first ever permaculture course, the tutor had us sitting under an absolutely enormous oak tree. It was incredibly uncomfortable because the ground was dotted with acorns and mast from the previous year. But what they asked us to do was write down the name of the tree on the centre of the page. If you prefer, if you're somebody who doesn't like doing mind maps or thought showers, you might want to just put it at the top left-hand corner. And what I'm going to ask you to do over the next few minutes is think about what your particular tree, what functions does it serve? Now, they might be concrete functions. So it might be a windbreak, or it might be a home, or it might be a shelter or a landmark, or they might be more abstract. It might be, it looks beautiful. It inspires people. It acts as a memorial for something. So I wrote down a cedar tree, because I've got a massive cedar tree on the lawn just outside. And I wrote down a number of the different things that my cedar tree does in the landscape. At the bottom, I wrote down, just to remind me, things like humans, animals, birds, insects, plants, fungi, lichens, moss. So different creatures appreciate the functions of the tree in different ways. So I'm going to ask you over about 5 minutes to name the tree, if you know what it is. Doesn't matter if you don't, you might just call it Bob or Francis or tree, whatever you like. But I'd like you to identify what functions, what does your tree do? Okay, about 5 minutes, just checking. What does your tree do? Okay, 5 minutes. Lovely, thank you. Fantastic. I can see an awful lot of hard-working faces. Oh my goodness. Well done for a Wednesday afternoon. Okay, so again, in the chat, if you'd be willing to jot down any of the functions that you thought that your tree was performing. Performing sounds terribly perfunctory, that your tree does. What does your tree do? Oh, provider of crumble. I love that. Symbol of guerrilla planting. Yeah, whilst the council dragged their feet. Where I used to live in mid Wales, there's still a forest of plum trees which we guerrilla planted. We sort of obtained these wild damsons and then we just went to a hillside and planted them. Dappled shade, tree history of the local climate, 100-year-old pear, centerpiece for the orchard, beautiful. What wonderful, comfort and grief, absolutely, gosh. A wild weather vane. Yeah, our weather vane on the top of where I live got bent in a storm recently. We were wondering if any of the trees would come down. They didn't, just the weather vane. Marker of time, stronger and tall, inspires, weathers, fantastic. Gosh, I'm just reading the chat. These are amazing. These are beautiful. Lovely. Oh, battleground for the rooks and magpies. My God. That's I'm going to use that one just to take us into the next exercise, because what I would like you to think now, having thought about what your tree is doing in the landscape, I'd like you to think about what the sensory experiences of it are. So 5 senses broadly: see, hear, smell, taste, touch. 5 minutes on those things. Okay. Okay, this time I'm going to invite anybody if they fancy just saying aloud what they wrote down, because this will get us in the mood for not the next exercise, but the one after that. People have the opportunity to read a bit if they fancy it. So, any particular things that came up? Warms new honey to forest room temperature. Lovely. You can put it in the chat if you prefer, or you can actually speak. You have to unmute yourself first because I won't know otherwise.
Oh, I can go.
Please do.
So I said that it looks like winter hope and sounds like the striking of canes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how just that brief description, the second one acts sort of onomatopoeically so that I can hear it. Wonderful. Yeah, really good. Really good. Thank you. Anyone else? Helen.
I kind of went in a different direction and I did the senses of the tree. So one of mine was the tickle of a spider spinning a web.
The tickle of a spider, absolutely. My goodness. Do you have one of those trees near you that just seems to be festooned as though it's, I don't know, it's Spider Christmas and that they have decorated the whole tree?
Thankfully not. I don't like the sound of that.
My partner is very much not happy with spiders and trees, but there's something about the joy of walking through a spider forest when the spider's webs are damp and crystalline and slightly frozen, and that you come away with a crown of silver stars. Just amazing. Okay, maybe not with the spiders, but it's really fun. Thank you very much, Helen. I can see your face is just like, yeah, no, thanks, no. I don't think so. Okay, I'll stop talking to that particular hand. Spiders. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to ask is, and this is lovely as a segue, so thank you for that, the emotions you associate with your tree. What emotions? So about 5 minutes again on the emotions associated with the tree that you've just been considering. Okay, about 5 minutes. I'd encourage you to write down any particular emotion that you identified that you associate with your tree. I just kicked a few in there. My main one is relief. I feel huge relief when I see it, the top of the tree coming over the hill when I'm on the way home, and I suddenly think, oh, I can see the tree. Oh, what a relief. It's coming back to my trees thing. Lovely. Oh, I can see some beautiful ones coming up in the chat. Smashing. I feel as though that piece of poetry about no poem being as beautiful as a tree, that always just sort of runs through me. So over the last 40 minutes or so, you've come up with a huge range of things. We've got colours of a tree, the functions, what it does, the sensory impact of the tree, what emotions. You might have also written down some flora and fauna to do with the tree, like the spiders. Sorry, the spiders again. What I'm going to ask you to do now, and you're going to have about 10 minutes for this, and at the end there'll be an opportunity to share if you want to. I would invite you to write about a day in the life of your tree, or it might be a life in the day of your tree. And you can write it from the first person, so as though you are the tree, I am, whatever. Or you might write it in the second, you are, or in the third, he, she, it, they. However you like. A day in the life of your tree. Okay, about 10 minutes. And you might want to use all of those things, the colours, the functions, the senses, the emotions, what other beings inhabit the space. Okay, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning when we're getting close to the end. All right, lovely people. I can see lots of people have turned their camera off while I'm writing, which is awesome. I love that. It gives me the illusion that people are actually, you know, doing the thing. So we've got 10 minutes. I'd like to keep the last 3 just to do some wrap up, but we've got quite a bit of time if anyone would like to read what they've just written. On Monday, we had several people who read their pieces. Don't be shy. Everyone here wants to hear. I can see Sam waving. Fantastic. Go for it, Sam.
Okay, cool. Can I tell you what tree I've written about, or should I? I've written about the London Plain. Your daily existence is a reminder of what makes London beautiful, an intersection, a delta for culture and heritage, where storied waters mix to become one new body. Your bark inhales our shortcomings and exhales them to start anew. People don't know the part you play in London's heritage. You are a foreign love story, a climate hero, an icon, a giant, an ever-evolving work of art, and you're hidden in plain sight.
Wonderful. Really wonderful. Last year, the London Plain won the Arboricultural World Cup for Urban Trees, which is taking place at the moment online. If you go to the Arboricultural Society, and it was up yesterday against the wild cherry, and I wasn't sure who was going to come out on top, but the London Plain, an iconic tree. That was wonderful, Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's an iconic tree.
It is. It really is. It just
lovely story.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful piece of writing as well. Thank you. I hope that we might find a way. I'll talk to Andrew about this afterwards. I hope we might find a way for people to send in some of their things, that we can feature them somewhere. Lovely. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read something from last year's Canopy in that case. Canopy, there's the most recent edition has just come out, which is pieces of work that have been shortlisted in the Urban Tree Festival writing competition, Poetry and Flash. This is last year's one. This is a piece by Nick Fox, who wrote something called The Guardian of Spar Wood. Thanks for being such a good neighbour. Keep in touch. We won't keep in touch, although I have been a good neighbour. I have looked after his spare key. I have taken in his Amazon deliveries. I have lent him my screwdriver. But he rejected my greatest act of kindness. One thing you must do, I had said during our first conversation, is to walk along that footpath between Grange Road and Spa Hill. It's magical, so unexpected. A woodland track joining two ordinary London streets. He had promised, but he's never set foot on that path, even though he passed it every morning on his way to the bus stop on Spa Hill. He has never walked those few grassy metres to the ancient oak tree which guards the wood, as though allowing entry only to those who know the password. Stepping beyond it, I shall see its smaller companions, horse chestnuts, hazel, holly, ash. I shall hear a great spotted woodpecker drumming on a tree trunk by day, a tawny owl hooting by night. I shall see snowdrops in the spring and hawthorn berries in autumn. This world is mine because I have befriended the oak. It has stood here for over 300 years. Its three gnarled, ivy-clad trunks spreading branches that twist over the path, forming a leafy vault above the entrance hall of the wood. I wanted my neighbour to be the oak's friend too, and now he is leaving. His loss. I read this partly because Nick has spoken very passionately about the particular trees. And if we were to write it from the tree's perspective, I'd love to know what the tree thought about Nick visiting, or whoever the I is, the narrator is of this particular story, and what that tree sees in a day, a week, a month, a year, what it thinks about. Do trees think? Maybe they do. What would a tree consider about the people that pass it by, that don't pay it any attention, that have no mind to it, that have no consideration? Now, one of the wonderful things about Canopy last year was that it asked the people who contributed to think about 4 different writers and naturalists, John Clare, William Wordsworth, Gilbert White and John Evelyn, 4 very different writers and 4 very different approaches to the natural world, some very romantic, some much more practical and gritty and down to earth, all of whom spoke to nature as though it was an essential part of the human condition, but also that humans had their part to play in a relationship, a good relationship with nature. It may be that what you've just been writing, and Sam, I definitely encourage you to think about this, is that next year when they run the Right Words competition for the Urban Tree Festival, you think about contributing if you haven't previously done so. I can see a couple of people have got copies. That's last year's, this is this year's. Just want to check that nobody else wants to offer their words just before we finish. I have to flick across because it's...
Yes, I will.
Lovely, please do, thank you.
I stand with my sister, as I always have. Once we were strong, but now we're not. And while we maintain our figures, and we have grown taller, now my sister wears. She's weary. Her grey skin no longer shines. Her hair accessories still sparkle and spangle, iridescent, flocking to her glossy green locks. But there are less of them now, and it seems almost as if they know that she is tired, slumping, just slightly, and one day she will fall. But until then, I try to hold her up, to nourish her, and give her hope.
Lovely. Really beautiful. Really beautiful.
Sorry, I felt quite emotional reading that.
It is an emotional thing sometimes, having our words heard like that. Wonderful. Really. Oh, goodness me, Clary. Smashing.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that somebody did last year after a session like this, they sent what they'd written on a postcard to a friend that they hadn't been in touch with for a while. That's just something that I encourage, to send your wood words out into the world. And that's harder to say than you might think. Okay, so a warm-up exercise, 2 minutes, and you can write either about nature or about trees specifically. What inspires you about trees or nature? What inspires you? 2 minutes. Okay, so you might have got a couple of things that you fancy putting up in the chat. What inspires you to write about trees or nature? Have a quick go up there. Timelessness, their connection to self and others, their roots. Oh my goodness, yes. Ancient forests. The way they keep growing, even when they are old and wonky. Gosh, mood, I feel that. I see myself in nature and I see nature in myself. Structure and sounds, shading and dappled light. Lovely, beautiful. The people over the last week have had such facility with words and images. I was planning on talking about a particular tree, and a tree that we might hope to save for the future. And that's the mulberry, the black mulberry in Bethnal Green in the East End of London. I used to walk past it every day when I was working in the East End. And it's been under threat for the last 4 or 5 years because some developers bought the property and they wanted to build on it. And people have been campaigning, of course, to save it, as you do. A beautiful tree. It survived the Great Plague and the Great Fire of London. It survived the Blitz. Quite a lot of it was damaged during the Blitz, but it survived then. And then it looked like it was going to be destroyed. And then this morning, the news came through from the High Court that it's been saved. And I have to admit, when I read about it, I cried. And I thought, how extraordinary that a tree could speak to me in such a way that even though I don't see it now, even though I won't see it probably not for a number of years, just its preservation touched something off in me, which meant I cried about it. The mulberry in Bethnal Green has been saved. What I'm going to ask you to write in a few minutes' time is about why we need trees, all wild spaces. Lots of people over the last year have really benefited. First half of lockdown, I had 6 trees that I could see from my window. And that was just a wonderful thing. Even 6 trees. Where I am now, there's about 6,000 and there's quite a big difference. But I thought I'd read you, just before we go into doing this writing exercise, something by Deborah Harrison in last year's copy of Canopy, and it's called Millennium Wood. Slow down, friend. Walk softly through the snow. Follow in my footprints into the white wood. Breathe in the scent of winter, crystallized on the frost-bitten fingers of the trees, slashed by Arctic winds across Beskar moss. Local farmers dug a Neolithic canoe out of the sodden peat, carved from a living oak when the world was flooded. Look about. What do you see now? Can you imagine the spring, life returning after this cruel, bloody winter? He helped plant this wood, my father, the doctor, on weekends off between surgeries and night calls, hospital visits, births and deaths. He never spoke to us of death, even when he lost her, his beloved. Instead, he planted trees for his grandchildren, oak and ash, rowan and holly, bird cherry and elder. For he was our father, true to his word, believer in life, doling out tough love always, to protect us so we would survive. But will we all survive? This time it isn't floodwaters of fire, it's plague, a ruthless pandemic that's got us in lockdown, going stir crazy indoors, being told, stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. whilst outside spring explodes into blossom, pink and white, magnolias and wild cherry, drifts of petals, a tide of confetti on the grass. So we wait, he and I, under his oak tree, watching acorns crack into new life. So for this first exercise, I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. I'm so specific, 7 minutes. Why do we need trees or wild spaces? Okay. Why do we need trees or wild spaces? About 7 minutes. Ready, steady, go. Hello. Hello, wherever you've got to, hold that thought. Possibly you might want to come back to this one later, or you might want to just let those words settle and rest for a bit. So it may be that you've got a couple of things that you'd want to put up in the chat. Sorry, I'm just fiddling around. I've got a frozen shoulder and I have to keep moving it to try and get it to rest. So why do we need trees? I think one of the things that I became very aware of when I was writing things for the Urban Tree Festival submission was that I think about them in terms of memory, and particularly in terms of community, the community in the tree and the community around the tree, reminders of the wild spaces within me, and also I would say around me as well, yeah, but within me, part of a complex ecosystem that works to sustain life. Very important context for living, contributes to a sustainable cohesion of humans with nature. I love that sustainable cohesion of humans with nature. Awareness that we're part of a system. Yeah, one of my PhDs is on systems theory and ecology and environmental learning, which sounds really posh, but it wasn't. It was basically an excuse to talk about trees. Harbourers of webs, wings, wisdom, and all wild things within and without. I love that alliteration. Remember about maybe you remember from school about this whole thing about alliteration, where you use the same letter at the beginning of something. I read yesterday that the ideal sentence has 21 syllables in it for the human ear. Isn't that interesting? I think that's bonkers, but 21 syllables. So da 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 da, and so on. Okay. Thank you. There's some wonderful things up there in the chat. Oh, I love it. Thank you. I'm now going to ask you a slightly different question, also about trees or a wild place. And that's to do with, for lots of people, we're coming into a sort of a transient phase of lockdown, or the end of one stage of the pandemic, or however you want to look at it. I wondered if there was a specific tree or place, a wild place or a suburban place, that you hope to be able to see again or encounter again or experience again. I've been thinking about the wild cherry that's in my dad's garden, and I haven't seen it for about a year, and I am looking forward to tomorrow when I will go to Hertfordshire and I'll be able to see it. So I'd like you to think about, is there a specific tree or a place that you hope to be able to visit again in the future? For some people, that would be because of the end of lockdown. For others, it'll be, it's just where I've always wanted to go. Okay? And I'm going to give you the same amount of time, about 6 or 7 minutes. Ready, steady, go. All right. Thank you. Now, very unusually, not very unusually, I'm going to ask anyone who fancies it just to say what particular place or tree they would like to see again, but perhaps out loud if you're willing. So it just means unmuting yourself. Down at the bottom if you're on desktop or laptop, up in the right-hand corner if you're on an iPad. I think probably other apps as well.
There's a snow gum eucalyptus in Kew Gardens that I miss.
Oh, lovely. I hope you get to see it soon. I hope you do. My goodness. Thank you, Lily. Anyone else?
There's a tree on Croft Danbury in Herefordshire on the hill fort, which it's one of those really ancient oaks that has branches that touch the ground and then grow up again. I haven't seen that for years. I'd like to see it.
Lovely, lovely, Jude. Thank you. Anyone else?
I've never seen the giant redwoods in Millennium Woods in California, and that's still on my hit list.
The to-do list. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. Oh, I think about this now sometimes, writing a list of the trees I still want to see that I have not yet seen. Yeah, totally. Thank you. Anyone else? Our childhood crabapple tree tent. I'm just looking up in the chat. The survivor struck by lightning. Oh.
One that would be on my bucket list would be the cherry blossom season in Japan.
Oh yes, my goodness, the sakura there, yes. Totally. I have Japanese family and I keep thinking, I wonder if I can persuade them to let me come and stay with them. Oh my goodness. It would be amazing, wouldn't it?
You have to love a country that has a day off to go and look at the trees. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. It's like the northern Scandinavian countries which give you time off to go foraging in the autumn. That profound connection, which is sort of honoured in that way. Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else? Smashing. All right. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier on this week is the different kinds of writing that people do about trees and wild places and suburban places where there is wildlife or flora or fauna. And I spent a bit of time going through my bookshelf, partly because my partner says that the only things I ever actually buy in terms of books are very short fiction, flash fiction, or short stories written by people I know or have read on Twitter, encountered there, or nature writing. Now, some of you might, I can see a few bookshelves behind people. Some of you might have got some nature writing on your shelves. There are approximately 12 kinds of nature writing. And I'm going to put this on a handout that I will send to everybody probably after Sunday. 12 kinds of nature writing. There's the diary. Here's a great example, Diary of a Young Naturalist, which was last year's Wainwright Prize and has just won the Book of the Year by Dara McNulty. Fantastic book, really fantastic. Young man from Northern Ireland, really wonderful. There's the epistolary, the letters, which is actually Gilbert White, you know, one of the original nature writers that's recorded. Gilbert White, the letters from Selbourne, fantastic piece. You get almanacs. We had an almanac on the back of our door, kitchen door when I was a kid, which had been printed by a local firm. Really wonderful, which showed all of the passage of the seasons and the things that you found at different points. And my mum annotated it with the local food that was in season, because we were quite hard up when I was a child, so we did a lot of foraging. In the spring, I got called Stinker at primary school because we smelt of wild garlic all the time. My God. Back then, it was meant to be a terrible insult. Now I look at it and I think, actually, that's quite cool. Maybe I should be Stinker again. That'd be great. You also get memoirs, things like Helen Macdonald's H is for Hawk. You get books about single species or quests. I love a good quest. I was thinking about Waterlog, the one about going swimming across Britain. Absolutely wonderful book, Roger Deakin, much missed. This is a chronicle of a year. This is Stephen Moss talking about his particular patch in Somerset. Absolutely lovely book. Wild birds Wild Hares and Hummingbirds, which he calls a natural history of an English village. So it's a bit like a biography of an English village's nature. Smashing book. You also get things which are really idea-based. And this is Matt Gore's book, A Journey into Light, which is called Under the Stars, which is all about the quest and the journey and the idea that we desperately need unpolluted night skies, places where we don't necessarily feel overwhelmed by sodium lights and artificial light at night time. When I lived in Oxford a few years ago, I lived on a canal boat in the centre of Oxford, and just occasionally there was a nightingale that got really confused in one of the neighbouring college gardens. And I thought about this quite a lot. How if birds get confused and bats get confused and insects get confused, how much do we get confused when we're in an environment which is not really attuned to the human condition? And how much do other animals get affected in this way? Anyway, it's a lovely book, Under the Stars by Matt Gore. You can tell I raided absolutely every shelf. We don't have very many books where I live at the moment because we're here temporarily. You also get polemical books, books which are really with a political message. And the one that I immediately thought of was Feral by George Monbiot, who is totally a Marmite writer. You either love him or hate him, and it seems very few people are in the middle. But he can really write when he's got wind in his sails and passion behind him. Feral is a really interesting book about this question of rewilding and wilding in Britain and what that means and what the consequences might be. You get histories, of course you get histories. This is quite a nice book by Richard Smythe, which is Human History from a Bird's Eye View, an indifference of birds. He's also a Marmite writer, but it's a fascinating book. A field guide, I'm trying to find my field guide. Oh yeah, this is nice. This is a field guide. I've had this since I was about 7. I think I won it. You know, we had to draw a tree and there was an Observer Book of Trees as a prize. And I read it now and I realise that some of the descriptions and some of the explanations about the trees, they were written by people who really loved them sometimes, but sometimes I've got a feeling they didn't really know the tree at all. It wasn't like there was a personal relationship between the person who wrote that section on the home oak and the actual tree itself, which is interesting. Always interesting in field guides. Does the person like what they're writing about, or do they not? This is also a kind of a history or field guide. This is about a woman called Len Howard, who wrote this amazing book called Birds as Individuals, quite a long time ago now, back in the 60s. My granny faintly knew her, and Len was quite an eccentric, I think is a fair description. She lived in Sussex. She basically lived amongst the birds in as close a way as that you can, but just in, I think she thought humans were quite peculiar and birds were not. And it's a really interesting evocation of ordinary everyday species that we used to take for granted and her relationship with them. But this is the story, her story. So this is, if you like, writing about someone who was absolutely immersed in nature. So it's a different kind of angle. This is the same kind of thing. This is a new book by Natasha Carthew, writing about rural working class women. Natasha always has a strong, wonderful thread of an encounter with nature running through all of her work, their work, and they regularly have these strong memories of nature from a working class perspective. And if you're not sure what a working class perspective is, I really recommend this one particularly, which has just come out, but any of the things that Natasha's published in the last few years. Wonderful stuff. Now, I tell you about all of these mainly because I'm absolutely confident you're all writing really well, and you will want to possibly make sure that your writing gets out there, whether it's poetry, prose, a bit of journalism, a press release for a campaign that you're involved with, a manifesto, a poster, creative non-fiction, a story, poetry, whatever, whether that's going to be so that you get to be in one of these next year, or because you're passionate about trees and nature. There are two really important questions to ask yourself when you're writing about nature or trees specifically. And I think about this a lot, usually after I've written something and I look at it and I think, oh, I don't know, where did that go? These two questions. What is it about? What are you writing about? And then the second question, what is it really about? So any of these books that I've just talked to you about, you could say that this is, Natasha's book is just an exploration of rural working class women. It's not, it's so much more than that. You could say this is just a book about a slightly eccentric person who moved to a small cottage in Sussex when she retired, and about her observations of the natural world. It's not. It's a lot about how do we manage to live in this world? How do we affect this world? How do we retreat from this world? How do we engage? So these two questions, it's often a good idea when you're starting out writing something to think about, what do I want to write? What do I want to write? Do I want to write directly about it? Do I want to write the kind of description that we get in a field guide? Or am I writing about something else? Is there something else underneath it? Last year in Canopy, I wrote a story which was really a fictionalized account of my dad, who lives in a care home, whose little tiny room overlooks a car park, and who bravely misses the landscape where he grew up in South London, and also the house that he lived in for 50 years before he had to go into care. And it's an extraordinary 50 years. I tried to get it into 250 words about what it's like to leave something you love, and what it's like to describe and talk about trees and places that mean something to you. I fictionalized it because it gave me a bit of distance, so I could write about it at a distance, because sometimes, my goodness, it's hard to write the things close to you if you write them in the first person, if you write them from you. This takes me on to this kind of a last question, really, before we do a final quick exercise. And I'm going to ask people just to answer it out loud rather than write it down. Why do you want to write about trees or nature? Why do you want to write about trees or nature? You can put it up in the chat if you want to, but you can also say it out loud. I can see some dear despots to celebrate and honour them. Fantastic. Yeah.
I love trees.
Wonderful. Yeah, as straightforward and as profound as that. I love trees. Thank you, Catherine. Lily. Oh, you're putting the heart up. That's really nice. I like that.
Just because they're there, it's like you can't go out without seeing trees.
Because they're there. That wonderful thing about, you know, why did they want to climb Annapurna? Because it's there. Yeah. Because it's there. Ingrid, I saw you put your thing. Yeah. You've just turned yourself off again accidentally. You've turned your mic off. There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it's to find out a bit more about my relationship with trees.
Sure.
I can't quite articulate that, but there's something there about wanting to think about the relationship.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. And sometimes you find out about what you're articulating through the process of doing the writing.
Mm.
Absolutely. This lovely little story, 250 words. I wrote 15 drafts of it over the space of about 2 weeks, trying to get to the core of what I meant, rather than just having some nice words in a story. There was something I wanted to communicate. Wonderful, absolutely. Anything else from anyone else? Okay. So the last thing I'm going to ask you to do, thinking about what you've written already, what you've been perhaps chewing over, I want you to write something briefly that starts with the phrase, here's one I prepared earlier, I should have been a Blue Peter presenter, which starts with the phrase, I believe that trees. I believe that trees. If you want to swap out the word trees for nature, that's cool. I'm going to suggest about 5 minutes on this. I believe that trees. Okay. Lovely. Thank you. Doesn't an hour go fast? We're very close now. I'd like to invite anyone who fancies it, just reading aloud what they wrote. Doesn't matter how rough it is or how polished it is. If you just fancy it, just unmute yourself and speak. I can see a few people are still writing. It's like, no, I've got more to finish. Don't make me talk. Roz, go for it.
This isn't an original idea. I have been attending quite a lot of the arboricultural talks and things, and so it's just I believe that the tree should not be seen as just the living wooden structure, but should be viewed in terms of what's underneath the soil, the roots, the fungi, the invertebrates, the mammals, birds, and all the species that live upon it. So to me, the word tree is encompassing all of those things.
Wonderful. Here's a whole community. There's a whole vibrant, wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Umi, I can see a hand.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I read what I read out what I wrote?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. I believe that trees carry messages. We only have to stand close, hug, and listen to their rustling leaves. Feel the raindrops dripping from their canopies onto the trunk below, or hide from the burning sun and stand close, listening to the messages of deep below. I feel calm as I do so. The message to me is clear. We will be all right, my dear. Just keep me close. Whenever you feel anxious, just come to me. I'll dance with you until you are happy again. Like me, you are free.
Wonderful. Really wonderful. I hope you can see that other people are giving you a little round of applause.
Oh, okay. I'll show you my face.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. It's always hard to follow on from each other. Has anyone else got something they'd like to offer the group? Thank you. Yeah. I'm doing the quick flick across just in case I don't miss anybody. Some of you got the most amazing screensavers. They're so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And things behind you. I've just realised that Judy's got cupcakes. That makes me very happy. And Lily's got blossom. Oh, it's beautiful. I'm aware that we've got only a couple of minutes. So I want to say just a couple of things about what comes next. If you've been writing over either just today or over 3 days, you may want to submit your work somewhere. You may want to do a poster of it. Square in the middle of a paper, you write out what you've written, you decorate it with trees or leaves around the outside. Honour your words. You've worked hard for them. Honour your trees, your natural space, honour your words. I'm very grateful to Andrew from the Urban Tree Festival who let me come and do these 3 sessions. It's so nice. So nice. You can also buy a bundle of the 2 copies on the Urban Trees website. And if you fancy following me on Twitter, I made lots of friends at the Urban Tree Festival last year. So if you're a Twitter person, I can't do the others. I'm rubbish at everything else, but I can manage Twitter. I'm Electra_Rhodes. And if you follow me and say that's how you knew me, awesome job. I'm just trying to think of, yes, I'm going to send out a handout which will have a list of the things that I read and a list of the books that I mentioned and a couple of the exercises and places where you can submit work about trees or about nature writing. You're just awesome. I'm so grateful to you for being here for this hour. And I'm hoping that Andrew is still here so that he knows how to turn it off, because otherwise I will just keep talking and waving at you in a friendly way.
A very big thank you to Electra, because she's been plugging us really well. She's been a superb supporter of the Tree Festival. And I think she's run 3 fantastic workshops, and I'm sure everybody here feels the same. So thanks, Electra, and thanks everybody. Now I'm going to end this meeting. All the best.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye, bye, bye. See you soon. Thank you.